I'm a science communicator trained in paleontology, and today I want to introduce a predator that looked like a wolf, paced like a wolf, and yet was not a wolf at all. Picture an amber afternoon on Tasmania, wind in the eucalypts and a river threading the hills like silver wire. Beside me hikes Rowan, a community storyteller whose grandfather swore he once heard stripes breathing in the dusk. He points toward a valley once called the hunting ground of the Thylacine. The animal settlers nicknamed the Tasmanian Tiger for the bands across its back. A tiger that was not a tiger, a wolf that was not a wolf, an echo from another branch of the mammal tree. To understand the illusion, we need to talk about convergence. Given enough time, nature sometimes solves the same problem twice. Canids on one branch and thylacinids on another both became stealthy, long-legged hunters of open country. The results rhyme: a long snout, erect ears, a tail like a counterweight. But open the body and the poetry changes. The thylacine was a marsupial. Its young were born tiny and unfinished, then crawled into a pouch to nurse. Its skull carried different suture patterns and a distinctive set of shearing premolars. The hind foot lacked a clawed big toe, and on a female the pouch opened backward to shield her young while she ran. None of this is cosmetic. Biology is biography. Convergence can fool the eye, but bones tell on us. We pause at a weathered sign. A watercolor shows the animal mid-stride, stripes flickering like shadows of grass. Maya, a wildlife artist who joined our hike after losing a commission in a hard year, sketches as I talk. She wants to draw something worthy of a creature we failed to keep. And she asks the same question viewers ask: what did it hunt? The honest answer is that the thylacine was probably more fox-jackal than bull-wolf. Its bite wasn't made to crack big bones. It likely targeted small to medium prey such as wallabies, predemelons, bandicoots, birds, and the occasional young kangaroo, using a long, efficient trot to wear down distance. Stealth, patience, economy, these are the tools of an island predator. Rowan tells us about the films. In black and white footage from the 1930s, you can watch a captive thylacine stretch like a cat, yawn like a hinge, then pace its pen with a dancer's precision. The tail is straight as a metronome, the mouth opens alarmingly wide, yet the head stays delicate, almost fox-like. The last known individual, often called Benjamin, died in 1936 at Hobart's Beaumaris Zoo after exposure to cold when it was mistakenly left outside overnight. It hurts to say the year out loud, because the animal had shared the island with people for thousands of years and then vanished within a single generation. But the thylacine story does not begin in a cage. It begins deep in time. When Australia broke from Antarctica and drifted north, it ferried marsupials into isolation. Among them, the thylacinids diversified into nimble carnivores. Fossils show their relatives on mainland Australia long before Tasmania split by rising seas. On the continent, the lineage later dwindled, pressured by climate shifts, human hunting, and the arrival of dingoes a few thousand years ago. Tasmania, lacking dingoes, remained a refuge until rifles, traps, and clearing followed the flocks. We crest a ridge and stop to listen. I talk about anatomy because bones are our letters from the past. Look closely and you read distinctions, for teats protected in a backward opening pouch, a length in calcaneum for leverage, sharing premolar shaped for slicing, a long nasal chamber for cooling air on the run. These are not trivia. They are a biography written in calcium and cartilage, a record of how the animal solved the puzzle of food and family in a lean island world. Maya shows us her drawing. The thylacine is half-turned, ears cupped, stripes dissolving into spinifex. She has added a faint plume of breath, as if dawn were cold. I ask why. She says the hardest part was accepting that something can look familiar and be deeply different, and that our eyes are lazy. We see a wolf, we say wolf, we act on the story we believe. Rowan points toward a distant pasture. The pastures are where the thylacine's trouble hardened into policy. As sheep numbers grew, newspapers blamed a convenient villain. Bounties were offered. Trappers set steel jaws along fence lines, and bullets traveled faster than doubt. Disease may have weakened wild packs, habitat loss compounded the toll. But persecution did the arithmetic that extinction required. By the time anyone asked for measured proof, the ledger of bodies was already persuasive to people in towns who rarely met the animal but felt certain of its guilt. At sunset, we reach an old shearing shed. Swallows stitch the doorframe with sound. I tell the group that science is not just a vault of facts. It is a practice of attention. The Thylacine teaches attention. It teaches us to examine lookalikes carefully, to weigh rumor against measurement, to hold wonder and evidence in the same steady hand. The animal wore the face of a story we loved and the fate of a story we wrote too quickly. Tonight our task is to slow down, to breathe, and to listen for stripes in the wind, not because they are returning, but because attention might save what still lives beside us. We misread its likeness. Morning fog hangs over button grass as we start day 2, and the valley feels like a museum without walls. I tell the group that extinction can be recent and still be archaeology of the heart. We follow a faint trail where wallaby prints dot the sand like commas. The Thylacine would have read this ground fluently. Its gait was an economical trot driven by the hips. When it pivoted, it braced that stiff tail as if it were a fifth limb, a habit you can still see in the old films. Jess, a young field ecologist hardened by years of camera trapping for devils, meets us where the trail crosses a creek. From her notebook, she pulls a photo of an Aboriginal rock painting from the mainland that shows a narrow dog with stripes over the rump. The art is old and the memory older. The Thylacine ranged far beyond Tasmania into continental Australia and New Guinea, then withdrew as climates dried, as people spread, and as dingoes arrived. Islands keep secrets, but they also magnify pressures. We stop beside the ruins of a boundary fence. Here the myth of the supervolf found its loudest megaphone. Pastoralists feared for flocks and newspapers obliged. Yet when biologists measured jaw mechanics, they found a modest bite compared with true big game specialists. The gape was huge? Yes, but leverage is what breaks bones, and leverage was not its gift. Stomach contents from a few museum specimens and tooth-wear patterns point to wallabies, predemelons, bandicoots, birds, and carrion, with sheep mostly appearing where people had already changed the landscape and where scavenging was easy. Rowan shares a family story about a farmhand who tried to tame a pup, then set it free when bounties brought rough men to the valley. He admits the story is polished by time. What can be measured is sobering enough. For decades, private funders and governments paid for carcasses, and traps did their work along fence lines and creek crossings. Habitat was cleared, den sites collapsed, and what the traps did not catch, policy finished. Disease may have passed through stressed populations. By the early 1930s, silence spread faster than rumor. Maya slows to photograph a clump of bracken. She tells us she draws the Thylacine differently now, not as a monster, not as a saint, but as an animal making a living with the tools it had. Artists make choices that become arguments. She widens the rib cage to honor the endurance engine, slims the muzzle, lifts the ears, and leaves the stripes as the shadow of grass. This is how science and art talk to each other. One names, one notices, both care. As midday warms the sedges, Jess explains how scientists test claims. We compare toothwear to infer diet. We skin bones for stress marks. We analyze isotopes to map water and food. We build biomechanical models and ask computers to run 1,000 hunts no human ever filmed. And when someone brings in a doubtful photo, we slow down and ask good questions. What is the scale? Where are the shadows? Does the tail taper right? How do the ears sit? What trackway would that stride leave on sand? Skepticism is a form of love when the stakes are a species. At lunch we pass around a cast of a skull. The canines are sharp but not oversized. The premolars are blades. The lower jaw is slender. The coronoid process small. The orbits face slightly to the sides, granting a wide field but limited overlap. The message in bone is caution and efficiency. An animal like that likely hunted alone or in pairs, taking what the landscape offered and saving energy whenever it could. Rowan asks the question many of you are thinking: could there still be a few out there? I tell him what I tell my students: hope is important, and so is scale. Islands hold rumors well, and stories love to dress as stripes in the fog. But decades of surveys, camera grids, scat searches, and road watches have found rumors more often than evidence. I would welcome proof and gladly help review it. For now, saying clearly that the thylacine is gone honors the truth and the animal. Jess adds a last point: declaring a species extinct is not despair. It is a promise to the living. When we stop waiting for a ghost to solve a modern problem, we can fund devils that still snarl in these gullies, coals that still glitter in headlamps, and raptors that still ride the thermals over this valley. The thylacine becomes a teacher who refuses to take attendance, a lesson that arrives precisely because the bell no longer rings. By afternoon, the fog has burned away. The valley opens, and we see the long seam where forest meets meadow, a line that stitches two worlds and also frays them. Edge habitats carry conflict and creativity in equal measure. That is where the thylacine used to appear, skirting shadows between trees and paddocks. If you stand long enough, you can imagine the low-trotting silhouette, ears forward, tail straight, stripes like finger paint on tawny fur. The animal is gone, but the grammar of the place remains, and it keeps teaching us how to see. Stay curious. That evening, we gather around a small fire ringed with stones, and the talk turns to futures. Someone asks about bringing the thylacine back. The question carries hunger and hurt. In storage rooms around the world, museum skins and alcohol jars hold fragments of DNA. On hard drives, algorithms hum. In lab cells divide under a jelly-clear light. Could those tools assemble a living echo of the Volf that wasn't a Volf? The honest answer is complicated. We can read much of the genome and compare it with living relatives, but genes are a script and a life is a rehearsal on a stage that must still exist. A body is context made visible. I explain what de-extinction would require: a close surrogate to carry a pregnancy, deep knowledge of development, decades of husbandry, and a landscape ready to receive an animal that learns through family and territory. Even if the engineering worked, a first generation would be pupils without teachers, stripes without stories. Recreating a body is not the same as restoring an ecology. We should keep learning, and we should keep asking why. If the goal is to heal an island, then protecting what remains may be the better use of grief. Jess pokes the fire and changes the angle. She says that the thylacine broke our hearts. Now we must let that heartbreak fund pragmatism. Fence lowland creeks so stock cannot trample reeds. Keep old-growth tea trees that shelter bandicoots. Bait cats and foxes where they have crept in. Keep devils healthy so scavengers erase carcasses before disease learns to travel. Seek small, doable wins that add up to room for everything that still breathes here. Rowan shares a line his grandfather loved: the bush has a memory longer than any newspaper. When the devil's cough, he listens. When the coals leave fewer tracks, he asks why. When someone blames a striped ghost for a missing lamb, he walks the fence and counts the holes. Knowledge lives one boot print at a time. That kind of attention is slow, but slowness is a form of care. Maya opens her sketchbook and lays out a sequence of studies. In one, the animal is mid-trot. In another, it sits awkwardly like a dog that cannot decide to lie down. In a third, the head swings back as if the ears have heard an answer behind. Notes fill the margins: narrow chest, high hips, long toes, soft paws, tail a lever, stripes like ferns. She says she will keep drawing for a year. She wants the last panel to sit beside a devil, a coal, and a human toddler reaching for sun through leaves. That is a triptych about kinship and repair. Near the end of the night, I tell a story from bones. In caves on mainland Australia, thylacine remains lie in layered time, with lenses of ash left by ancient fires. Those layers say the animal survived change more than once. Evolution's lesson is not that survivors are the biggest or the fiercest. It is that they fit the day they wake into. The Thylacine fit a page that people later tore out. When we choose which pages to keep now, we are choosing the readers who will come after us. In the dark the wind lifts and drops. Someone asks what exactly we should remember after the day's hike. I offer 3 small things. First, resemblance is not identity. The Thylacine wore a wolf's outline, but raised its young in a pouch and solved problems with a different toolkit. Second, evidence beats rumor. When an animal is accused, measure teeth, test bones, and weigh claims against numbers. Third, wonder is a discipline. To keep wonder honest, pair it with work. Learn a bird call, learn a plant, teach your child to step softly. Morning again, we walk the last miles with quiet minds. On a slope above the river, we find a scatter of wallaby bones and a single devil track pressed into damp sand, toe pads like commas. Life continues, stubborn and unscripted. That is the blunt mercy of ecosystems. As we turn toward the vans, I ask the group to picture the Thylacine not as a vacancy, but as a verb. To thylacine is to learn from a likeness without confusing it for the thing it resembles, to leave room for ordinary animals whose survival we can still influence. Before we go, I hand Rowan a field notebook and ask him to read the first page aloud. It is a pledge I use with my students. I will test my stories against facts. I will bend my maps to fit the land. I will refuse to make a monster when a neighbor will do. I will spend attention like currency on the living. As the vans pull away, a cloud slides across the sun and the valley softens. If this had been a different century, we might have looked back and seen a low tawny shape trotting the fence line, wearing its borrowed mask with shy precision. Today we see absence, and then we look again and see presence. We notice the blue flash of a wren and the high arc of a wedge-tailed eagle over the ridge. We hear the stitched music of insects in grass. The story of the wolf that wasn't a wolf does not end with loss. It ends with work, and with the ordinary, daily courage of people who decide to keep a place generous. Yes,